and the principles of the pesticide registration toolkit and EMTK and the future integration of soil assessment into this important toolkit that FAO has developed for decades now. And we will have also the launch of the standard operating procedure on the detection of pesticide residues in soil, and finally a stakeholder dialogue, as I just mentioned. And then it will be the chair of the International Network on Soil Pollution, Professor Ravi Naidu, who will close the session at 2. I will be the moderator of this session for the first half an hour, and then I will hand over to my colleague Maria, who will continue with it. And those are the speakers that we will have today presenting all these different items. So with that, I stop here and I give the floor to Ms. Torm Wolfram for opening remarks. Torm, you have the floor.
Thank you, Natalia. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues, I am sincerely delighted to welcome everyone to this pesticide pollution webinar. Like Natalia mentioned, jointly organized by the FAO's Global Soil Partnership Technical Network on Soil Pollution, INSOP, and the FAO Plant Production and Protection Division. The webinar focuses on raising awareness about pesticide residues in the soils and what tools FAO has to address the risk of soil pollution. Pesticides have long played an important role in society by protecting crops, safeguarding food production, and controlling pests that threaten both human health and livelihoods. They are used not only in agriculture for the production, storage, and transport of food and other commodities, but also in public health programs for the control of disease vectors, such as malaria. The use of pesticides accelerated rapidly during the Green Revolution of the 1950s and 1960s, significantly boosting agricultural productivity. However, this progress has come at a cost. Excessive pesticide use has led to widespread contamination of ecosystems with harmful effects on non-target species, water bodies, soils, and ultimately human health. Soil in particular is one of the primary recipients of pesticide residues. Pesticides that accumulate in soils can persist, affecting soil biodiversity, contaminating food chains, and transferring to groundwater and the atmosphere. Scientific studies have raised concerns about the unknown and potentially harmful effects of pesticides mixture in soils. However, the number of products in use makes it challenging to assess all possible combinations and associated risks. That is why coordinated efforts, harmonized protocols, and collaborative research are so essential. Today's webinar presents an important opportunity to raise awareness about the scale of this challenge and to share what the FAO and its partners are doing to mitigate the risks of pesticide pollution. FAO has a long-standing history in pest and pesticide management, with various divisions working together to minimize pesticides reliance, promote integrated pest management, and ensure the safe and effective management of pesticides. The Global Soil Partnership, together with the Plant Production and Protection Division, is actively working to address pesticide pollution in soils as part of FAO's broader commitment to sustainable food system and One Health. Over the years, FAO has developed several international standards, guidelines, and tools to support countries in managing pesticide risks. Today, as mentioned by Natalia as well, which we are very pleased to present one of our newest tools. That is the Harmonized Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs, for determining pesticide residues in soils, developed under the International Network on Soil Pollution, or INSOP, as previously said. Once published and used in the field, these SOPs will strengthen the ability of laboratories and countries to monitor soil pollution caused by pesticides more effectively. I would also like to take a moment to warmly welcome our long-standing partners from the Wageningen University, whose expertise has been invaluable in supporting the Global Soil Partnership soil pollution work. They have contributed extensively to the global assessment of soil pollution reports and the technical development of key tools, including the SOPs for microplast analysis in soils and the pesticide residues SOP we will be presenting today. Having said that all, I wish you a productive, insightful, and fruitful learning session. Together, through the INSOP network and the engagement of all of you, I'm convinced that we will move much faster to a world where zero pollution is just not an ambition. It's not just an ambition, but a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Torun, for these opening words and for also setting the scene on how and when these tools can be used. Let's move on now to our first presentation, that it will be done by Professor Violet Hazen from Wageningen University, who will be presenting the pesticide residue mixtures omnipresent in European agricultural soils and the implications for global health. Violet, we are very happy and very grateful for having you here with us today, and you have the floor for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to present here. I hope you can see my screen.
For some reason, I cannot. If you stop sharing and share again, I don't know if it's only me who doesn't see.
No, maybe it's always.
I only see a small line.
Do you see more now or not? No. So
yes, now it's good if you go into full mode.
Yeah, okay, I will do so. Okay. So, up. Okay, I think we are here.
Yes,
okay,
now
today,
it's perfect.
Yes. Okay. Yes, thanks again for inviting me. I'm coordinating together with Vera the SPRINT project, which is a project on European scale and including Argentina. And I would like to present you something today about the outcomes of our SPRINT project related to soils and soil pollution with pesticides. Shortly, we had our final conference yesterday, so if you would like to have more information, you can go to our website and see the outcomes in detail. As today, I will give a short update. The SPRINT project was meant to develop, test, and validate and deliver a global health risk assessment toolbox for the integrated assessment of the impacts of pesticides on terrestrial and aquatic systems, plant, animal, and soil and human health. Furthermore, as mentioned before, we do not forget the importance of showing transition pathways towards sustainable use of pesticides in a multi-actor approach, and as well finding possibilities to reduce the dependence on pesticides. Just first one short context. How do we feed the world actually? 32 million square kilometers are used for grassland, 6 million square kilometers for feed production, 8 million square kilometers for food production. So as we can see here, land use could be changed between feed and food production areas, which would allow us as well to produce more calories directly for human health, for humans. As we all know, yields from organic farms are about 20% less than from integrated pesticide management or for conventional farms. The big question is, can we feed the world? Can we feed the increasing population? And what we know, actually, we produce 2,700 calories per day, already taking loss related to harvesting into consideration. That means actually we can produce more food than we need per person, and we waste about 30% of the food. So that means we are able to feed the world, and the people who are now starving on hunger don't starve because there is not enough food on this world, but it's a distribution problem. So please keep this in mind. It is possible to transform agricultural systems to having less yields, but to guarantee still food safety and food security. And as well, if you take the concept of planetary health diets into consideration, which asks people to eat less meat, more plant-based food, and produce more direct food for humans. Please don't forget this, because the narratives are very strong. We will not be able to feed the world with reduced pesticides. And based on these global data, which I have found, and which are proven to be true, this can be done. Let's now go to the open questions of global health risks caused by pesticide use. Pesticide residues in terrestrial ecosystems and in humans were missing based on large-scale monitoring programs. Until now, there were only modeling data available on a bigger scale. So in the SPRINT project, we were the first one who approached this in Europe, and Vera will present the approach for Africa in the next presentations. Approval procedures for pesticides in the European market, and in others, I think it's the same, are not taken into consideration mixture applications and mixture of residues. Integrated reference values are only there for food and drinking water. We don't have maximum residue levels for soil, air, or indoor dust. What about fate models? In Europe, EFSA applies fate models, focus models, to simulate the transport of pesticides off-site. But one very important pathway, like wind erosion and the particulate transport with the water, is not taken into consideration. And what is needed is an improved set of sensitive indicators for ecotox and tox tests. And surely we have discussed in 30 years how we do the transition to sustainable agriculture. I think we are ready for this. There are enough tools and we can do it, but it just have to be implemented. Let me now show a little bit what we did in SPRINT. SPRINT started in 2020, and yesterday we had the final conference in Brussels. So what we started in SPRINT Mid, taking into consideration that there is no large-scale monitoring data. So we did an extensive data collection across 10 European countries and Argentina in IPM and organic farms. And then, based on our findings in soils and in other different matrices, which I will show you later on, we developed ecological and human toxicity assessments and tried to improve them based on real-world data. Furthermore, we advanced in exposure modeling and risk assessment. We engaged stakeholders, and we are still ongoing. The project was prolongated for half a year. We are developing, and this is done in collaboration with the FAO, the Global Health Risk Toolbox. And we are showing pathways to transition. The toolbox will be available in the final version in the end of February 2026. But now back to what did we do in the soils and what did we do in total? We identified in 10 different European case study sites with covering different of the main cropping systems of Europe, and in Argentina in the summer in the growing season 2021, pesticide applications and the resulting pesticide residues in ecosystems, in the terrestrial ecosystem and the aquatic one, in humans. And we tested here more than 200 residues, of which 32 were used as a dual use and were as well used as a bio site, and one synergist. So here I want to emphasize how important it is to take soil into consideration. If you speak with non-soil scientists, they say, and how and what? What do we have to do with soils? The healthy soil is the soil is a memory of everything what we do. So in the soils, pollutants are accumulating over time. And we could see this very clearly in the SPRINT project. We saw a lot of DDTs, which are outsourced 50 years ago. They are there. So the soil is our memory. But from the soils, pollutants or whatever is in the soil is spread by air, by wind erosion, by evaporation, by solute transport to the surrounding environment. And persons are exposed to this by inhalation of the air, indoor dust. and dermal uptake. So please don't forget how important the soils are for the overall health. And as well, the aquatic environment is completely connected with the terrestrial environment. So as well from here, soils, pesticides are applied to soils, not to water bodies, but this pesticides ending up in the soils will be transported by runoff to water bodies or by leaching to groundwater. And please don't forget, and this is what we found, the long distance transport by wind erosion is actually not integrated in any form of FAO models. So the concentrations we found, I will show in the next slide, in indoor dust could not be there if you only follow the model applications. So the model doesn't take this transport into consideration. So it is not transported, it is not there. But the monitoring showed something different. And here, although we focus here on soil, I will present here what in total we have found. We found that mixtures of residues are omnipresent in ecosystems and in indoor dust. I here don't focus on human matrices, where we as well confirmed the presence of mixtures of pesticides, especially in urine, but as well in feces and in blood. 7 to 37 pesticides are applied in the case study sites. Per field, 2 to 32 different pesticides. Is this fact taken into consideration into the regulation? No. The farmers are sold the pesticides as to be safe, and each pesticide is tested by itself in the pre-market approval assessment. But it is not taken into consideration that for certain crops, you can apply until 30 different pesticides per growing season. And apparently farmers do this as well. So what does it mean for soil health and as well for the farmer's health and for the environmental health if these 30 pesticides or even only 20 are applied in one growing season? Nobody has ever tested it. So what you can see here, first of all, is we found in all matrices mixtures, mainly mixtures, and a high accumulation in the indoor dust. You see here the numbers of residues. And in the indoor dust, we found up to 123 different pesticides. The winner was the Netherlands. The farmers had more pesticides in the indoor dust as numbers, as concentrations as others, and glyphosate was a predominant there. But as well in water and sediment, as well in soils, all contain mixtures, and even in organic farms, here mentioned as OF, you find mixtures predominantly, less concentrations, less numbers, but still mixtures. Why? I will here zoom in into only the soil, the outcomes of the soil. Here seeing conventional farms in Europe, organic farms in Europe and in Argentina. So we found in total 96 pesticide residues in conventional farms, 49 in organic farms. We took 10 samples per case study site. 99% of the conventional farms contained pesticide residues, 96% mixtures, and 95% of organic farms had at least one pesticide residue, 79% mixtures. How is it possible? The DDTs, which are applied, as I already said, and the old ones, the outsourced pesticide, were still present in organic farms. So because the grandfather, the father applied it there, or it came up with the rainfall, with the water, with the air. So it's an illusion to test a single pesticide in a clean soil and to look at this effect, because these clean soils do not exist anymore. Neither the other water body, the other environmental matrices. What we then did, we tested PEX and MAX, measured environmental concentration and predicted environmental concentrations that are used by focus models of the EFSA. So we found that only 4% were reliably addressed. 28% of the predicted and of the measured environmental concentrations were higher than the predicted ones, and about 70% were lower. So that means if we only come up with 4% reliable concentration, so it would be very important to as well calibrate this approach of the focus or escape model with real field data. What about the potential hazard? We were checking the PBDB hazard characteristics of the residues detected in the terrestrial environment. Here as well, CF, conventional farms or integrated farms, OF, organic farms. So what we could see here, we have looked at the approved ones, the candidates for substitution, and the non-approved ones. And in the row above, you can see that is important for us, the soils here. So 78% of the approved pesticides residues detected in the soils are moderately hazardous for soil organisms. So the candidates of substitutions and the non-approved ones, we still found more than 4 and 5%, which are highly toxic, pardon. And for honeybees, we found here as well, even for the approved ones, highly hazardous pesticides still in the environment. But what does it mean to us? So from hazard to risk, here is the effect hazard times exposure is risk. So we will show you now here the approach of SPRINT. How did we come from hazard to risk? So here our colleague Jäger, he already published this paper together with our colleagues from Switzerland. So we found, as we said, a lot of pesticide until 26 in the soil environment. So what Coyote did, he ranked the pesticides by frequency and the risk coefficient and the persistence in the environment. And therefore, he came up with a ranking of a mixture of 5 pesticides per case study site. So that means in SPRINT, we ended up having 11 sets of mixtures of 5 pesticides. And they tested the top 5 pesticides. They tested them on soil invertebrates, that means earthworms. The laboratory earthworm Eisenia foetida, Lumbricus as a native species, on bees, on plants and microbes, and on springtails and mites. So this approach for the prioritization of pesticide mixtures is published and could be used for all sampling where you have data on a pesticide monitoring. So you could use this approach to select the mixtures because it's impossible to test all the mixtures with all the combinations which you have. What here is presented by my colleague Paula da Silva. She shows the percentages effects of each concentrations of the mixtures. Here only giving one example for an approach. You can see on the left side the mixtures we were taking. We called them by the countries where we found them. So this is the different mixtures, and you can have details if you would like to want afterwards. So for Argentina, Croatia, and further on. So for the 11 pesticide mixtures we selected, here you see the measured environmental concentration, predicted environmental concentration, and 5 times predicted environmental concentration. So what can be seen here, we were testing here as an example, the reproductivity of the laboratory worm Eisenia foetida. And we can see here that in Czech Republic and in Portugal, about 50% of these, we had showed a reproduction decrease of 50%. With the predicted environmental concentration of the mixture we found in Czech Republic, it was 100%. And with 5 times BECS, we found as well a lot of reduction. So this approach as well can be used if you would like to see, we use it for different indicators. So this can be used, and what we found as well out is that more sensitive species we tested, like Lumbricus rubellus, the native species, showed much more sensitivity to the pesticides mixtures, which we have seen now. What my colleague Jakob Hoffmann found out as well is that single pesticide concentrations were below the threshold of effect, threshold values of effect. Therefore, we did not expect any toxicity. But when we saw the mixture concentrations and the pesticide mixture concentrations, significant toxic effects of pesticide mixtures were seen at measured environmental concentrations. As you can see here as an example for the Netherlands, for the mixture we detected in the Netherlands. So that means if we just take the NOx from literature into consideration, summing them up and saying, oh, there is no effect. That is not true, because we have synergetic effects. So these mixtures should be tested. What as well was found out, and it was really interesting, the more species you use for a test, the more risk you will detect. So if the number of species, for example, is small, then for Denmark, Netherlands, Czechia, and so on, then you will not find an effect. But if you come up with more species tests, then you will find strong risks. And the more species you have in a mesocosm experiment, this reflects what is really going on in the soils in real world. So the conclusions for risk assessments for soils is, first of all, PECs should be calibrated with max based on real-world data. Long-distance transport by wind erosion should urgently be monitored and addressed when calculating human exposure. And in the SPRINT project, we are still working on this model component for the wind erosion. Particulate transport by water erosion must be included into the focus fate models. We have already publications where we show how this could work. EFSA risk assessment should include sensitive multi-species tests and pesticide residue mixtures based on real-world data. And last but not least, and that is still ongoing here in SPRINT, is application schemes should be tested in multi-species tests to detect the real-world effects, because what we did we only tested residues of the active substances. We did not take into consideration in these multi-species tests I showed you now the pesticide applications. But this as well is important to do, and to as well, if you recommend a set of pesticides for being applied in one crop or in one region, test these pesticides together and test their effects on soil health and maybe just human health. And do not forget, with all of this, include all the stakeholders, which put them all on board, which we have here on the SPRINT project. All sectors are on board to come together to a solution for sustainable transition. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Violet, for this very interesting presentation and for highlighting, and this is the key message I take home from your presentation, is that soil is very much relevant to global health. And this is what we have been pushing for, clear inclusion of soil into the One Health, and particularly relevant when we are talking about pesticides. So thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. We have time for a few questions, I think. I don't see any particular question right now on the chat, and there are no hands. So we can continue with the next presentation, and we keep the chat open. So at the end, we can have some discussion if the participants come up with some questions specifically for you. Anyway, keep an eye on the chat, and if you see something you would like to address directly on the chat, please feel free to do so.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I now hand over to my colleague, Maria Konjuskova, who will continue moderating the session. And I really apologize because I need to jump to another important meeting, and I'm really sorry to miss, but I will definitely watch the recording of this session. Just for you to know, we are recording this webinar. It will be shared with all of you and all those who have registered, and we will also we will share also the presentations. Maria, over to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. Hello, dear colleagues. So let's move on to our next presentation, which will be given by Vera Felix da Graça Silva. So she's a researcher at Wageningen University and possesses a PhD in soil pollution. She's a project scientific manager of the Horizon 2020 SPRINT project on sustainable plant protection, transition, global health approach. And she's also involved in the monitoring of pesticide residues in European Union and African soils. And today she will present the results of the pesticide work done in this Soils for Africa project of Horizons 2020. Vera, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present indeed some results. I hope you can be seeing already my screen now in full mode? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yes, so indeed, well, a line of thought is very much in line with the one presented by Violette, but the data set with hi, can you hear
Now
me?
you're back. Now
Oh,
you're
sorry.
back.
Okay, well, yes. So I'd like to start indeed with a statement from this Nature Geoscience publication that indeed is estimated that 64% of global agricultural land is at risk of pesticide pollution, 31 of high risk. However, these are predictions based on pesticide use, and the field validation is a key aspect here. And when we look into pesticide information in soil, especially in soil, this is rather limited, which does not allow some of full validation of this assumption. When we consider the African context, this is even more stressing. So, of course, here it adds, as happened in Europe recently, the lack of soil-specific protection instruments, few monitoring programs, and there are obviously high analytical challenges involved. Soil is a very complex matrix, and also the analytical itself, there are different ways that had been used. So when we did a literature review, we found 88 studies. So it's not that there is no data there. And these data cover 25 countries. However, as you can see in the picture in the right, in pink, most of the studies comes from 3 countries only. So indeed, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Kenya. And if we do look deeper and if we consider the pesticides that are currently in the market, this pool of data is even more reduced. So there are only 31 studies addressing currently used pesticides, and these cover only 5 countries. So indeed, our information about presence and potential risks of pesticides in African soil is rather limited. Even more so if I tell you that these studies are prior to 2015, so they have more than 10 years old. So we have indeed the opportunity within the Soils for Africa project that was also an Horizon 2020 project, just finished in the end of May. And this project had indeed developed a soil information system, an open access soil information system. And I'm very happy that pesticides were included as one of the indicators under investigation. And indeed, we did try to have a snapshot. So on one hand, to update the available information, and on the other hand, to provide also a harmonized data set. This was the first information for some locations. This could also give you some additional support towards trend analysis in these better studied countries, but also and foremost to inform stakeholders and regulators and policymakers indeed about priorities in terms of pesticide use and regulation. So without going into much details, I want to stress that especially doing this research in Africa brought some challenges, and part of them relates with protocols. So we have to develop a lot around collection protocols, shipment protocols, analytical. We have already quite experienced, but it needs to be adapted also for the local conditions. So well, I'm very happy that today we are here and around indeed the SOP, because I had just now the experience in practice about some of the challenges that doing this type of investigation brings. So we managed to collect 272 soil samples, all from agricultural land. These were collected over a time span of 2 years, and they are from the top soil where pesticides tend to accumulate. And in each one of these soil samples, we analyzed 153 pesticide residues via the Kesher's method. How did we come up to these 153? Well, we look into what was available in literature. We have already done the review, so there were some indications of presence or likelihood of presence of some. We had also done interviews in the field to farmers about current and past pesticide use. We look also into databases about pesticide sales. And we did also a complete full screen in 10% of our samples to make sure that we were not overlooking any compound from this approach. Of course, that comes again, analytical limitations into play, and we end up indeed with 153, which you can see here in this figure. Not going into details, but I want just to highlight that we analyze active substance, we did analyze metabolites, and we did employ different methods to have a comprehensive overview as possible. So some of the results. So out of the 272 samples that we have tested, only 56 came back pesticide-free. And I put pesticide-free between quotes on purpose because, well, we had a targeted list, so maybe others could be there or could be even at levels lower than the ones that we manage analytically. So 216 samples had pesticide residues. 53 had one, and 163, so most of the samples, had mixtures of pesticide residues. So this corroborating also what Violet presented now for the European context. In Africa, simple mixtures were the most common scenario, so between 2 to 5 residues. But there were also some that presented numbers as high as 14. And as you may recall, but I also put here in gray the reference of the European findings. These numbers are actually slightly higher than the ones in organic in Europe, and slightly lower than the ones in conventional in Europe. What we also found was that the results were very diverse in terms of the compounds that we encountered in soil, in terms of their combination, so the mixture composition was also highly variable. And it was not only variable in space and in crop, it was actually a combination of both factors. So I put just in the right a map, so you can see that there are areas where, for instance, you see more green, that indicates indeed no pesticide residues or reduced number of pesticide residues. And there are areas more towards the red where you do kind of see a hot spot of contamination of soil, which of course requires further investigation on why is this happening. Without entering into much detail and on the graphs, but these I present these graphs. On the left, you see the distribution in terms of numbers of pesticide residues in soil, and in the graph on the right, you see the levels. And I want to present here to highlight that indeed the composition levels and numbers vary highly among countries and among crop types. And actually, they don't often relate with each other. So it's not because you have more pesticides that you have higher content. So indeed, that stresses the importance of having these measurements and not relying only on predictions of what is expected in soil. More about our results. So we tested 153 pesticide residues. We found back 63 across the samples. Out of these, actually, only like 20% had been mentioned to be applied to these crops. So I want here to stress the importance of indeed account for background contamination and having the importance of having records about pesticide use, but also to have a comprehensive analytical capacity. So indeed to go beyond the obvious. We have looked into the characteristics of the compounds that we found. We have also looked into the characteristics of the compounds that we tested and did not find. And they were highly variable within both groups. So again, here stressing the importance of having measurements to validate and improve predictions. What came across us indeed as quite confronting was when we look into the hazard profile of the most common substances in African soils, which you can see here in the right. So there are 7 pesticides that were found in more than 10% of the samples. And again, without much details, you will have the presentation later on. But without entering too much details, it's important to understand if this presence is on one hand justified by the use of the substance itself, about if it's very crop specific, if it's more generic, if half-life time, for instance, can explain this, but also into environmental fate concerns about ecotoxicology impact, human health impact. And here, the red in this table indicate that there is evidence or high uncertainty and concern about this impact. So for me, it was quite confronting that indeed we do see that the most common ones are actually of high concern. I also put here some figures in text about the levels of individual pesticides that, well, sometimes were up to 5 milligrams per kilogram. Glyphosate, its main metabolite TAMPA, and tebuconazole were the ones with the highest contents. And then total pesticide content was also up to 7 milligrams, so lower than in Europe, but still rather substantial. What we did next was, okay, we have this information. We want to understand what are actually the meaning of it. So we did a theoretical risk assessment of these findings. So we gathered information for soil invertebrates from different databases, PPDB, the Pesticide Properties Database, Open Food Tox from EFSA, Ecotox database, and we also went to the EFSA reports to fill any gaps from these databases. From these, we calculated PNEC, so predicted no-effect concentrations. We have counted uncertainty via assessment factors, and then we derive risk quotients for the pesticides, and then for the location, as summing up the quotients of all the pesticides present in the location. And here in the pie chart, you see the risk analysis of the African soil sample. So in green, you have the 56 that had no pesticide residues. Then you have in gray 16 samples, 16 locations where we did find some residues, but for which there is no enough information, ecotoxicological information, to derive a reliable risk assessment. And then you do see 24 samples with rather negligible risk, 40 low, and then 65 of medium, and the highest part of the pie chart is of high risk. So indeed, more than 20%, 24% of our locations are indeed of high risk. And if you may recall my starting sentence of Tang 2021, that she does mention around 20%, 31% worldwide, well, African soil from the pool of samples that we analyze are somehow in line, slightly lower, but in line with this. Again, we also look into how this risk differs in terms of country and also crop, because of course pesticide use depends strongly on both factors, regulations on pesticides as well. So we have done this analysis, and then we provided a more specific one for each one of these countries, so also to have more relevance for stakeholders. So we mapped all the locations and all the compounds contributing to this risk, so you could identify priorities, knowledge gaps, and the drivers of toxicity. Of course, this is theoretical, needs to be tested because we know the mixtures, and we do know that these compounds may interact with each other, possibly potentiating the toxicity. But this is still rather important to, one, inform on which mixtures are currently in soil, so that can be used further on for more realistic assessments. So as conclusions, we have, again, unfortunately, see that indeed widespread pesticide contamination of agricultural soils in Africa. The levels are generally lower than in Europe, but there are countries where actually we got rather high and rather complex mixtures, which might indeed be linked with the intensification of production in these regions. We also noticed that there is a high frequency of not EU-approved substances in African soil. So I think indeed here having a more holistic assessment of the substances, dangers, and sharing of information is quite crucial. especially because, as I stressed before, the most common compounds in soil, the 7 ones that I have mentioned before, are of high concern based on environmental, ecotoxicological, or toxicological criteria. And then 24% of the locations show high risk quotient. So again, validation by testing these mixtures in a pool of species will be a next step, as well as explore the implications to human soil health, human health, and all the environmental compartments in between. This is my last slide. So I wanted indeed I was showing up to now pesticides in soil, but I want here to upscale it a bit because I do believe that this is pesticides and pesticide contamination pollution is indeed a multi-actor and multi-matrix problem. So of course, soil is quite a key element and connects with the rest, but indeed should be tackled as such. But it's also a multi-actor and multi-matrix solution, I would say, and that's why I put also a poster from FAO from some years ago about be the solution to soil pollution, because indeed it's important that the awareness and the responsibility is there. Also, because this brings the scale, so we start by using pesticides sometimes in our houses, in our fields, in our community, but also because there are transboundary movements and impacts of this pesticide production system. So it's important that this is acknowledged in research agenda policy, recommendation policy needs in terms of what is approved in the market, but also to make sure that we go back to check if our measures are indeed being effective. And this monitoring is a key aspect. And I'm very happy that now in Europe we have the soil monitoring law. And I hope that soon I'm presenting these results with African more regulation as well. And yeah, last, obviously, and the point is that I hope that all of these triggers discussion and actions around transition and more sustainable practices for soils and in general. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Vera. It was indeed a very impressive study. And I would like to inform our audience that the presentations and the recording, they all will be shared on the website of the network, so everyone can go through. And also our speakers are now available for the questions. So you are welcome to raise your questions out loud. You can find the raise your hand button in the React. So if you click on React, you can raise your hand, and then I can give you a floor. And actually, even if you have the questions to the first speaker, Violet, because we didn't have enough time to give a floor for questions, so you are welcome to ask to both. Yes, Stefan, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, good day to everyone. Stephen Robinson. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor to several obsolete pesticide projects in the Central Asia region. One question which I have over the many years, as one of the speakers correctly pointed out earlier, is that the toxicity of a single pesticide is not necessarily the toxicity of a cocktail of pesticides. To my knowledge, there is a shift of paradigm in the European Union on the horizon. To go away from the classical, you have a toxic agent, it impacts the body, and then you have a linear cause impact relationship, to something which is called bioassay, where you would simply see what is the impact of a cocktail of different chemicals onto a biological test body and say whether it has a bad health impact or not. To my latest understanding, this is still very much in the research level, but could very well be turning, if successful, into a new legal framework on the European level. But I would be very interested whether any one of the audience here or the speakers would have a bit more detailed information where we are with this process. So the keyword is bioassay. Thank you.
So our speakers and the audience, they all are welcome to respond.
Well, thank you first. Maybe I start. Thank you for the question. I think it's indeed very crucial, and I am indeed also aware of these efforts around more holistic and this paradigm shift. And I think indeed EFSA itself and also now with PARC collaboration, they are doing great advances in connections, getting more information to indeed do it more holistically. At the same time, it's a rather big challenge in my perspective. And I think I don't know how fast we will have indeed like these discussions and these data, like for instance, what has been generated in SPRINT with native species and multi-species setups. How does this is fast addressed alongside other evidence that into regulations that is a key point, I would say. So I'm also keep tuned for development. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it is there. EFSA is working since some time on these multi-pesticide approaches and as well multi-species. But one thing is to have tests ready, which are ready, they can be implemented. And the other thing is to get them implemented. And EFSA suggests these ideas can suggest if they want to the European Commission, the European Commission will decide. And so I think we are here always depending on political situations. So it is not that there is not a tool which can be used. And this can be as well interesting for other countries. There is a tool which you can use. You can use a multi-species test to apply. But we as scientists will, we depend on political decisions, which here in Europe's changed very fast in the last years. So, but I think it is important for us as scientists to know that tools are there. Yeah, so maybe sometimes it's good that we try to apply this, what are there until we wait for solutions on a higher level.
Thank you, Vera and Violet. Stefan?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it at least confirms that, yes, the process is ongoing. I'm from a non-EU country, so I have a bit less insight in this kind of things, besides that my daily work is more practical on disposal. But we also have in disposal with the whole dioxin analysis, touch upon the question of bioassays to prove emissions in disposal facilities. And I think what's very important is obviously what is scientifically feasible is not necessarily what is legally approved. So there's obviously a difference between that. If it works and you have a great tool, as long it's not part of legal regulations, there is still an important step missing. And I assume that's still a few years to go before the EU could maybe approve such a legal framework. And only then, obviously, it would be a legally binding and valid new tool to assess what is the toxicity impact of whatever we develop as a technical society. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are any other questions, you are welcome to raise your hand. We move to
jump here into the chat. Good afternoon, everyone. I think there's some interesting questions, quite picky though, but I think it's quite important. Very simple questions, and I think it's quite important to have answers to them. Maybe a comment from our speakers here. First one is from Jirigon, one of our INSUP members. Very simple question. How do banned pesticides in the EU end up in Africa? And how can we tackle this problem jointly? Violet or Vera, do you have a simple answer to a simple question?
The simple answer is we are not policymakers. Look, it is absurd that we ban pesticides here because they are toxic and dangerous for environment and humans, and then we send them to the rest of the world. That is, but as well, what I think there is that the countries where it is sent to, they are able to look which ones are banned in Europe and as well have the possibility to ban them in their own countries. So there is not only, you can say, oh, the bad Europeans sent them to us, yet it's not good, it's bad. But as well, there is a responsibility. And what I'm seeing is more and more that these big international, multinational enterprises come into Africa, especially into African countries, produce flowers, produce horticulture, produce whatever, with banned pesticides. So there's a really a call for me to the governments, ban these pesticides as well in your countries and check this. Because if this is allowed, this flower production will be more and more extended in countries of Africa. And so it is, we should do our task here in Europe, which are banned, should not be exported or completely banned. But as well, African and other countries should say, okay, we don't accept them anymore. And I know as well from India to Nepal, they're going a lot through the frontier, a lot of these pesticides, banned ones. You have a lot of paraquat, diquat still in the world. So, and in China as well, so there's a ban there. Make in place in your countries a ban of these pesticides, and as well in the extension service, which you might have with farmers or other systems to control, ban them, and as well make people aware what this means for their health. Because often, yeah, even here, the high educated farmers in the Netherlands, they think that if the product is sold to them, it's safe because it has gone through an approval process. But this is not true, because the mixtures they apply were never tested. So please make as well farmers awareness, make citizen awareness and policymaker awareness to ban these products as well in other countries, and make farmers aware what would be the health effect for the environment and their own health in a longer term.
Well answered. Thank you, Violet. And Vera, here's the two questions addressed to you. Are PFAS pesticides a topic in African countries? PFAS pesticides. And secondly, have the data that you presented already been published?
Well, maybe I start with the second.
Yeah.
I finalized data analysis yesterday. So no, it's not yet published. But hopefully very soon. I have it now, just finalized it, so just in time. And about the first one, about the PFAS, I was doing indeed like literature review and reading about more the context, and I couldn't find much. I look briefly into it, just like as I start looking briefly into approval status in Europe, and it starts to go up. So I think I will put also something in this regard in the publication. So yeah, thank you for the remark. It's a good one, indeed.
Here, Stephen, can I add a few words on that? I also looked into the question of PFAS,
Nice.
again, from the hazardous waste side. To my understanding, I think there's very few fluorinated pesticides existing. This is not a very popular pesticide class. Another source of fluorine intake could be fluorine-lined pesticide containers, but I think the biggest intake of PFAS into agricultural soil is probably from the use of sewage sludge. We have in Switzerland currently enormous problems in the eastern parts. We have 15 farms which have now meet with PFAS levels dozens of times higher than permitted levels. And the assumption is this comes from Switzerland and the tradition of using sewage sludge as a fertilizer. And this practice stopped, I think, only somewhere in the 90s. Over.
Yeah, thank you. I think this also stresses that indeed there are multiple inputs also to, we are talking here indeed about pesticides, but if you put like then the layer of plastics, then you put then the layer of pharmaceuticals. So I think it's indeed, that was the two words that I wanted indeed to stress in my presentation, was one on awareness, indeed about being mindful and sharing the information and discussing, and indeed on responsibility, because yeah, to investigate further and to act and to take our own liability also into it. So I think indeed this PFAS raises here also for me questions about, and what about the rest, and what does this mean for the health of our soils? Thank you.
Yeah, so let's pick up one last question before we move on to the next speaker. Wolfgang?
Yes, thank you very much. So it's only I'm coming back to the topic of PFAS. So I dropped this question, and I would say that it is of course a big topic, I guess. So for Austria, I think we have up to 20% of the pesticides are PFAS pesticides, and the rest what is left over are a trifluoroacid, and this is also a topic which is found in groundwater almost everywhere, only to be aware of this. So this is the degradation last topic of the PFAS pesticide is trifluoroacid, and this is the remainings, and the remainings are found in groundwater. Okay, that's only a remark. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this remark. And yeah, now let's move to the next speaker.
Can I add something very quickly on the PFAS? Why the European Union approach to probably ban PFAS across the band is important. I've been discussing with many of my disposal industry colleagues on whether we have any chance to manage PFAS. There are doubts that high temperature incinerators are able to reliably dispose of PFAS. Then the only option with higher temperatures would be cement kilns. Cement industry is at the moment doing tests, but there are no clear results. And the only other technology I'm aware of is a spin-off from ETH in Zurich, which says they have on the laboratory level a catalytic technology, which would be fantastic because obviously catalysts are always nicer than processes with enormous energy consumption. But to what extent that could help us with remediating PFAS contaminated soil, that's a big question mark. Over.
Yeah, so I think that now we may close this part of our today's session and move to the speech of Sergius. I will give the floor to the coordinator of the International Network Consultative on Soil Pollution. So sorry, yeah, it goes automatically. He will make a presentation on behalf of our colleague from the Plant Protection Division, Oksana Perminova, who unfortunately cannot join today. Due to the mission, which is where she is now. And Sergius will discuss the current tools of this division, NSP, and how they can assist the countries in reducing pesticide risks. Over to you, Sergius.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much, colleagues, for joining us today at this webinar. And Maria, thank you for supporting us in the moderation. For those who are unaware, Maria is my colleague who is working on salt-affected soils, hence soil salinity is a big chunk of her life. But if you're interested about soil salinity, you can discuss this after the webinar with Maria. But today let's come back to soil pollution. And for those who are unaware, I'm the coordinator of the INSOP. I'm the one who sent you all this invitations for this webinar. And just to give you a quick overview about what kind of tools we have at FAO and what we've been focusing on over the last decades. Because as Violet pointed out, tools, it's very important for scientists, not only for scientists, but for many stakeholders to be aware of what kind of tools do we have available and accessible, and how we can further improve them. So starting from awareness raising that was delivered by our colleagues now, I would like to present you about the principles of the Pesticide Registration Toolkit and Environment Management Toolkit for Opposite Pesticides, EMTK, and also other tools that we have within FAO. Pesticides itself and topic of pest control and pesticide pollution has been always addressed by different division, which is called Plant Production and Protection Division. And they have the team of chemicals and pesticides colleagues who've been working on developing those tools. Just to let you know that my division, myself, Natalia, Maria, who've been working, which is the Global Soil Partnership, we were not involved in developing those tools. But right now, seeing that, as Natalia pointed out, as Violet, Vera said, that soil is very important component of the environment. And when pesticide applied, soil affected one of the most in the first ones. And so we are trying to combine together between what we do at INSOP, at Global Sub Partnership with colleagues in other divisions like the plant production and protection. And so on behalf of my colleagues and the team on pesticides, who, as Maria said, cannot join us today because of the mission in Uruguay and trainings held there in South America, I will present those tools and let you know what is available already and how we can improve them in the future. The three tools that are already available within FAO, as the first one is the International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management, the registration toolkit for pesticides and highly hazardous pesticides, and the environmental management toolkit for obsolete pesticides, kind of a guidebook of 6 volumes. So I'm going to go through all of those 3 tools right now. And then the next presentation will be focusing on what's coming up next, the new tools. And that's the whole point that we have this webinar, to present you what our members and the steering committee and our partners have been working on to develop the new tools, which is the standard operating procedure for measuring pesticide residues in the soil. But just to give you a quick overview of what has been already here for the last 20, 30 years, the first one and one of the most, guess, significant, the oldest one, is the Code of Conduct. The International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management. That was developed here from the 80s, from the 1985. And because any of our tools or flagship documents, they're not static, but we try to amend them and modify with new versions as time moves on. Right now, we're dealing already with the 4th version of this Code of Conduct that was established in 2013. I'm pretty sure with the time comes, there will be a 5th version as well, revised. The goal of this Code of Conduct, and that was pointed out by our last Director General in 2014, when the 4th version was published, is to guide government regulators, private sector, civil societies, and other stakeholders on best practice in managing pesticides throughout their life cycle. The Code of Conduct is on a voluntary basis. It's not a legally binding document for any countries to adhere to, but rather if the country willing to rely on the Code of Conduct, it's more than happy and welcomed. And we as FAO team can support and provide that information on how to navigate around the code. And it mostly focuses on the use of integrated pest management techniques, which usually integrated pest management involves the careful consideration of available pest control techniques, such as biological, chemical, physical, and crop-specific management strategies that has the aim to discourage the development of pest population in the soil and in the plants. And so it's very easily readable documents, about 30 pages, the Code of Conduct. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you to familiarize with one of these flagship documents that FAO has since the 80s. The second tool that I already introduced in my first slide is the tool on registration of pesticides. It is available in FAO e-learning platform, e-learning academy. For those who are unaware of the FAO e-learning academy, basically it's a platform that was actually launched just last year during the World Food Forum, and it has a lot of interesting modules and trainings for those people who work with food and nutrition security, with the sustainable management of natural resources, with the social and economic development. So it has a lot of different trainings and modules, and it covers the main goal of advancing countries to approach and to stick to those 2030 SDG Sustainable Development Goals that countries committed to develop and adhere to in 2030. And 3 tools that we have related to pesticide in this FAO e-learning academy is highly hazardous pesticide. So it's a 3-hour course of telling you what are highly hazardous pesticides, the risks, both environmental and human health risks that those substances carry when you apply them, how to find alternatives and replace those highly hazardous pesticides, etc. The second one is on a pesticide registration toolkit, about 2 to 3 hour training session that also tells pesticide registrars of how to register their pesticides. And the last one is obviously to using pesticide, how to use those pesticide registration toolkits. In order to obviously to fulfill or to study those modules or trainings, you need to go into FAO e-learning academy, create a login password, and navigate around. And it's very, very straightforward and easy to use. Now, regarding the learning materials for pesticide registration toolkit, although anyone can use it who is interested in the topic of pesticides, but when it was developed, the target audience was for responsible authorities and pesticide registrars. And when I say registrars, I usually mean that it's the government officials or technical experts working within national regulatory authorities who decide whether a pesticide can be sold and used in the country. And usually many registrars, when they want to register their substance for local authorities, they come up with a lot of data because to prove that your substance is free of toxics, it doesn't possess any risks to the human health, the environment, or any other ecosystems, you have a lot of data to deal with. And not all of those registers are aware of what kind of data do I need, what are exempted from submitting that data or not, because also depends on what kind of pesticide you're talking about. For example, if you're dealing with chemical pesticides, you're dealing with one amount of data. When you're dealing with microbial pesticides, you need to submit a completely different data. And so this kind of toolkit will tell you or navigate around of the data that you need, the risks that this pesticide can possess, etc. And right now, we already have trained about 400 registrars from 70 countries to use these tools, and that can help them to submit and fulfill the application for the authorities. A good thing about those tools is that it is available in FAO languages, and there's 6 FAO languages that we have. It's based obviously English, French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, and Arabic. And so if you're in possession of any of those languages, you can go to the pesticide registration toolkit. You can click on any of those languages and navigate around in the language that you're most comfortable with. The toolkits are all web-based registration handbooks, although there's always a print function available. If you want to print paper versions, you can always do this. All toolkits provide information to the reliable sources like OECD databases, ECHA databases, Tuscan US EPA databases. So it's all proven and reliable sources that the toolkit was built on. And it provides methodologies and strategies for registration. So it navigates you on the methods, on the testing methods that you need to fulfill, that you need to consider in order to register your pesticides. And it's obviously, it's free. That's one of the most valuable components for many developing countries, that it's all available for free of charge, and it builds your knowledge and expertise. There's always a guidebooks available of how to navigate around our tools. We can go to the YouTube channels, or I already put all those links. As Maria said, all those presentations will be available online, and you can obviously click on those links and see, navigate around where you will be transferred to. But we have some guidebooks that we encourage you to study before you go into and look at those tools. And obviously, one of the good things is that if FAO has resources I'm talking about financial resources available, and there's a official request from the countries to train them on pesticides, on the whether it's on the registration of pesticides or on the management of obsolete or highly hazardous pesticide that is already available in the field. Our team can go there and train, organize workshops on how to use those toolkits and provide management strategies. Usually it's 4 to 5 days interactive workshops that already was held in multiple countries. Here I just took some pictures of some trainings from Costa Rica and from Uzbekistan. And all those trainings can be organized at national or regional level. So that's kind of one of those toolkits of how to register or how to prepare you to register your dossier for submission to local authorities if you're dealing with pesticides. What if you already have pesticide pollution or the storage of obsolete pesticides, as for example, Violet pointed out that they found in SPRINT project DDTs that was already banned ages ago from the use in the field, or other pesticides that are under the Stockholm Convention like dieldrin, aldrin, mirex. But there's already some big storages still sits in the fields, and I have some colleagues after my presentations, for example, in Central Asia, who can explain whether this is the real case for some countries, that obsolete pesticides are still available in the field. And apart from the trainings that we provide, we have those EMTK guidelines that is available, 6-volume guidelines or toolkit for obsolete pesticides, targeted for audience for project managers who are in charge of national obsolete pesticide programs in their country, to help them design risk reduction strategies that caused by obsolete pesticides. It also targets officers of governments, of ministries of agriculture, environment, and health, to support them in collecting information about the substances in the field, and for local communities and storekeepers or warehouse keepers to help them assess the impacts and the situation in their storehouse for which they are responsible for. And so these 6-volume toolkit has 21 tools for all of those 6. I'm not going to go through what is available inside all of them, but just want to highlight that when those EMTK volumes were developed, there was lack or even complete absence of soil components. And so what we're trying to do now with my colleagues at Plant Production Protection Division with the pesticide team is to revise. As I said, all of our tools are not static. We can obviously revise them and adjust according to the needs and according to the new discoveries. And now, because soil is high on the agenda everywhere, we as a soil advocates at the Global Soil Partnership, we would like to integrate soil components to those volumes or to those tools where we feel is needed to be reflected in the future, because for many years, soil was not integrated enough in many of those tools. And so here I'm just going to go quickly of those tools and chapters that are available, and those that highlighted in red are the ones that we believe soil must be reflected. So for example, at the moment in volume 2, we do not think that soil must be integrated, whereas for volume 3 on disposal strategy, it has to. Volume 4, not much, although it still needs to be revised and discussed, whereas volume 5 needs to be revised carefully to make sure that the tools that we develop at INSOP and at the Global Soil Partnership are put there and reflected significantly. So for the time constraint, I'm not going to go explaining what each tool has, because it's 21 tools, but as I said, all of those tools and guidelines are available on our webpage, and I will be very happy to share them with you. And yes, that's all 3 tools. So the Code of Conduct, the Pesticide Registration Toolkit, and Environmental Management Toolkit for Obsolete Pesticides that I wanted you to be aware of, that where we have them, that us as a soil advocates will work from now on with the colleagues to revise them. And the new tools that will be discussed after my presentation, after some questions, for example, the SOP has also to be integrated in what we have already available. I leave here my email address and email address of my colleague from Plant Production Protection Division for you to be aware that if you have any questions regarding to any of those tools, you're more than happy to drop us an email and discuss further with us. Thank you, and we're open for collaboration discussion further. Maria?
Yes, thank you so much, Sergius. It was indeed very interesting. So I was listening with very much interest, and I had many questions in my head. And I think that it was a useful information for our audience. And using my position, being a moderator, I will ask the first question is that if you may answer, because I understand that Oksana is the one who is more aware of these kits and tools. First one is what does it give? Let's say, what is the benefit if you register the pesticide in FAO? It's the first question I have. What is the benefit?
Well, we at FAO would not register pesticide. Pesticide needs to be registered to local authorities. We, as FAO, and Stefan here also, who's working on pesticides a lot, we need to guide registrars of whether it possesses risks to the environment, to human health, the information that can be collected to register those pesticides, but it's the national authorities of individual country who register the pesticides.
Okay, and is it widely accepted, this registration form and approach?
Well, the registration toolkit itself was recognized as what's the definition of it? The SD something by SDG. I forgot. Well, anyway, it's recognized as a valuable tool and feasible, and we have already, as I said, 400 registrars from 70 countries, and 400 registrars. It's not just those that we already trained, and usually it's the local authorities, the government, the ministries from the agriculture, the ministries of environment. So we already have this kind of a working group of 400 registrars who are aware and who has much more knowledge, information, first of all, on the data that they need to collect for the registration and compile a dossier for national authorities, whether it's in Europe, it's ECHA, who's in charge, European Chemical Organization. In other countries, it's other authorities. And yes, we're growing, and as I said, with the new versions of the toolkit where soil components will be integrated, I think it will be even better.
Yeah, and before I give the floor to Stefan, a very quick question from the chat about the online modality for these trainings. Are they available online also, or only in person?
Well, it can be, well, what is available online is those modules or trainings that we have in FAO e-learning academy. And bear in mind, for example, when I registered for highly hazardous pesticides, I was not paying attention to all the information. At the end of the course, you need to pass exam, and you need to score at least 75% in order to receive official certificate that you completed this course. I failed first time because I didn't pay attention a lot and I didn't know about this exam and 75 pass mark. But the second time when I did it, my grade was much better, so I got the certificate. So for your own curiosity and information, if you want to learn about pesticides, alternatives, the data that you require, I highly encourage you. If you already working as a registrar, then the local authorities need, as I said, it's quite financially burdened to go in the field. So it also depends on the financial resources available from two sides, whether we can go and do those trainings in person.
Okay, so Stefan, you are welcome to raise your question, and also other colleagues, they can raise their hands using the react button.
Thank you very much. Sorry if I'm sort of overly active. First, on the registration question of yours, I'm working in several Central Asian countries on that, and I think one very important part also of establishing a registration system is not only to look at the toxicity of a pesticide, but also at other aspects of pesticide use, because there might be also economic aspects to consider. For example, let's say we have a very problematic pesticide, but it's the only one which you can use against locust. So then obviously sooner or later you will have the question to balance the environmental and health impacts versus the economical impact of low cost. And there's probably in each country a bit a different response to that one. And therefore, registration processes are usually country specific. Regarding soil assessment tools, Sergejus, I just want to point out two already existing tools which I think would be very helpful in your work. First, the COP in Geneva just in May approved a new tool on it's a new Stockholm Convention technical guideline on management of POPs, pesticides, contaminated soils. It goes the whole management cycle from initial assessment, level 2, level 3 assessment, development of management plans, selections of the best option, implementation, and post-control and aftercare of the site. So I think there you would have a very comprehensive, well thought through guideline from which you could take inspiration. We have within FAO also developed a guideline which is called the Rapid Environmental Assessment Handbook. Essentially, it is the same as the phase 1 assessment of the Stockholm technical guideline I just mentioned, but this is already tool we developed within FAO, and I'm currently in discussion with CSI to transfer the electronic data evaluation to within CSI. So that could be also a tool we could roll out as a FAO globally to sort of have a standardized tool for an initial assessment of contaminated soils and sites. Over. I can write you a mail on that if you like.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of things to discuss in our project in Central Asia and those tools that you mentioned. And one of the points that you mentioned about low cost and alternatives, indeed, in those tools that are presented in highly hazardous pesticide tool, for example, you have the scoring criteria and criteria that you have to consider. Apart from toxicity of the chemical, as Stefan pointed out, you need to consider cost effectiveness. You need to consider factors of trades risk, the availability of alternatives in the country, legislation and practicality. So all of these factors, it needs to be considered before you find an alternative to low cost or to any other pesticides that can be harmful to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergius. So I think that now we don't have any other questions raised. So let's go to our next session, which is the launch of the SOP on detection of pesticide residues in the soil, which you already made some introduction to it. And the speaker will be Adélia Varela from Portugal, and she will present this SOP on behalf of three lead authors of the members of INSOP, Eleni Karasali from Greece, who is the leader of the assessment working group, Adélia Varela from Portugal herself, and Nipuni Velivitia, sorry for my pronunciation, from Australia. And Adélia, she's from Instituto Nacional de Investigação, sorry, Portuguese, Agrária e Veterinária, and I hope that you can also say your institution yourself in a very nice Portuguese, which I adore. You're welcome.
Just to share my presentation. Mm-hmm. Oh, oh my God. Something wrong, sorry.
Yeah, at the bottom of the
okay.
you can
Yes.
press. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, oh, fine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adelia. I work at the National Institute for Agriculture and Veterinary Research at the Soil Microbiology lab, of course. And I'm collaborative member of the Chemical and Biological Technology Institute, Antonio Xavier, at Applied Environmental Mycology lab. And I'm also a member of the Global Soil Partnership International Network on Soil Pollution, hosted by FAO, and I'm from Portugal. So today, I'm very glad to present the launch of the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, on detection of pesticide residues in soils. Following the previous presentations, it's clear that pesticide residues in soil are a global concern, impacting both Europe and Africa, and raising serious health and regulatory questions. In this context, the XOP I'm presenting offers a practical and a harmonized approach to improve monitoring and generate comparable data across countries. Before presenting the technical details of the SOP we developed, I would like to highlight why harmonized approach to pesticide residue analysis is important. Variations in methods, detection limits, and quality assurance and quality control procedures across laboratories and countries often limit technicians' ability to compare the results. A standardized protocols ensures the use of consistent methods across labs, supports regulatory frameworks, ensures reliable data for environmental and health assessments, promotes staff training and capacity building, and helps minimize analytical errors and reduce cross-contamination. In additionally, standardization promotes inclusion in global monitoring and data sharing efforts. The process of SOP harmonization involves several steps, key steps. We began by identifying the analytical methods most commonly used for pesticide residue detection, consulting available documents, and engaging with experts. To capture the global picture, we developed a structured matrix and distributed to international network of soil pollution and GSP partner laboratories to gather detailed information on the specific procedures, extraction methods, detection techniques, reagents used, and quality assurance and quality control practices. After collecting responses, we organized and analyzed the data to identify common trends and consolidating them into a harmonized metrics. Lead authors were designed to draft the SOP supported by contributing authors and a review panel, providing technical input and feedback. The technical content from the matrix was transformed into a formal SOP with sections like scope, safety, procedure, limit of detection, limit of quantification, and quality assurance and quality control. The drafted SOP is currently undergoing internal and external reviews with contributing authors and GSP staff to ensure scientific rigor and practical applicability. This process aims to confirm that the document meets international requirements and can be implemented in diverse laboratory settings. We are currently at this stage of the process. Once approved, the SOP will be published and translated to promote adoption, including in non-English speaking regions. So the SOP authors are Nupini Vitia, I'm sorry, apologize if I pronounced your name incorrectly, from Australia, Elena Karazali from Greece, myself from Portugal, with the support of Sergius Justinov, the International Network of Soil Pollution Coordinator. In addition to the lead authors, the SOP was enriched by the contribution of 11 experts. They reviewed the draft, validated the methods, and ensured clarity across lab settings. Their feedback helped align the SOP with international standards. Once again, I apologize if I pronounce any name incorrectly. So thank you to Brendan Hallenhan from Ireland, Vera de Graça Silva and Violet Gayson from the Netherlands, Matthew Renault, Thomas Buccelli, Andrea Roch, and Felix Wettstein from Switzerland, Daihu from China, David O'Connor from United Kingdom, Cassio Mendes from Brazil, and Elena Shanikova from Russia Federation. Our first meeting, technical meeting, was in May 2024, with 21 experts joining to develop a harmonized procedure. 3 lead authors were selected, supported by 11 contributing authors for review and editing. Since then, several meetings and exchanges help us improve and finalize the SOP. Each contributor brought their expertise, and together we finalized the SOP manuscript with the valuable support of the data provided by 23 labs from 21 countries. The SOP follows the standard structure used by GSP technical documents, such as those from International Network of the Soil Pollution, Global Soil Laboratory Network, and the Network of Soil Biodiversity. In case of pesticide analysis, the SOP layout includes detailed descriptions of each section and item, following a standard format to ensure clarity and usability across laboratories worldwide. Before any extraction method is applied, must be properly prepared. Although soil sampling is beyond the scope of this SOP, as International Network of Soil Pollution is currently preparing the technical guidelines on soil pollution to be released later this year and covering various sampling techniques. This SOP is primarily intended to guide laboratory techniques in sample preparation, extraction methods, and analysis. The preparation steps include drying at room temperature, sieving to under 2 millimeters, labeling in the plastic bags, and storing at 4 degrees to preserve sample integrity. This prepares the samples for extraction. The SOP outlines two methods: captures, quick, easy, cheap, effective, rich, and safe, and soil liquid extraction. Both are compatible with the three main analytical techniques: liquid chromatography, coupled with tandem mass spectrometry, GC-MS also gas chromatography coupled with tandem mass spectrometry, and liquid chromatography diode array detection. Captures use solvent and salt-based extraction followed by phase separation and cleanup with dispersive solid phase extraction. It's fast and ideal for multi-residues analysis. Solid liquid extraction involves solubilization using a solvent followed by vortexing, ultrasonic bath, and centrifugation. It suits the sampler metrics or lower resourced laboratories. The choice of extraction and analytical methods depends on the pesticide's properties, the available resource, and the sensitivity required. The three main analytical techniques are liquid chromatography coupled with tandem mass spectrometry, offers high sensitivity, making it ideal for detecting polar or thermally unstable compounds. Gas chromatography coupled with tandem mass spectrometry, suitable for volatile or semi-volatile compounds, often requires derivation before analysis. And liquid chromatography diode array detection is cost effective with lower sensitivity, but still used when mass spectrometry is available. Each technique fits different needs depending on compound type, equipment availability, and lab capacity. Soil liquid extraction is time-consuming, has higher solvent use, has lower throughput and cleanup efficiency, and requires adaptation for different soils. But soil liquid extraction has a simpler workflow. Captures is fast and simple, use less solvent, provides efficient cleanup, allows high throughput, but it may need adjustments for soil-rich inorganic matter. In the SOP manuscript, 123 pesticides are included. Around 79% were analyzed using captures combined with LC-MS or GC-MS, and around 70% used soil liquid extraction, combined liquid chromatography, diode array detection, and 4% applied both extraction methods with any detection technique. The SOP is a practical tool to support harmonized pesticide residue monitoring. It promotes reproducibility, collaboration, and alignment with global efforts for soil health and risk assessment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Adelia. So for this presenting of the SOP, and we and FAO really hope that this SOP will be widely recognized and widely accepted by the countries. And due to the limit of time, we will not take the questions now, but everyone is welcome to put the questions in the chat, and I hope that we may address them. Now I give the floor to Sergius to moderate the next session on the stakeholder dialogue. Sergius. the floor over to you.
Thank you, Maria. And once again, thank you very much to Delia, Eleni, and Nipuni, who did a wonderful job in developing this SOP and putting everything together, and of course to the contributing authors. Just to highlight about Africa is that unfortunately we did not identify any laboratories in Africa throughout our network and through the network of other technical networks of the Global Soil Partnership, including GLOSALAN, who has the most extensive network of soil laboratories around the world, who already analyze pesticides in the country, in Africa, which is why we still have this gap. But as I highlighted, right now we're developing a project with our colleagues from the Plant Production Protection Division in West Africa to build this capacity and to address this urgent gap that not many countries, not many laboratories in African continent can and have capacity to analyze pesticide residues, techniques with mass spectrometer, etc. So it's still a gap that we're aware of, and we're working on that. And the SOP is now at the final stage of preparation for publication, and it will be published within a month or two. So by the end of this quarter, it will be available online. And after that, we will start training countries, training laboratories on the techniques of how to use the SOP, how to prepare procedures, and if resources available, procure the required equipment for it. So once again, thank you very much for it. It's been a quite challenging work, but I think we did a great. And now that's kind of 3 tools. So we heard about the extensive problem of pesticide pollution by colleagues from Wageningen. Myself and colleagues from INSOP presented tools that are available at FAO right now, including the new ones that Stefan just mentioned to us. And now I would like to give the floor to some countries. Here we have, we're supposed to have 3, Lebanon, Kazakhstan, and Cabo Verde, but Cabo Verde unfortunately is also in that training in South America these days, so they unfortunately cannot join us. But I know from the official channels that Cabo Verde also looking for support to train their registrars, to train the stakeholders, local communities in the issue of pesticide pollution, because indeed it's there. To what extent, I cannot say, because I'm not the representative of the country or FAO office, but we have some representatives, my colleagues joining us from FAO Kazakhstan. Saltanat, can you please identify yourself? You're here. I have 102 participants, cannot see you here. Saltanat is joining us, yes. And Rafi Eugene from FAO Lebanon, who also would like to give you a quick overview of pesticide pollution in Lebanon, whether it's an issue for the country, how can we tackle jointly, and whether the support in those tools will be needed in the future. Rafi, I also cannot see you here. Can you identify yourself by switching on your camera? Yes, Rafi is also here. Okay, great. And Saltanat, just let's start with you first. Saltanat, first of all, thank you very much for joining us, being on your vacations. I hope you're enjoying your vacations, but thank you very much for dedicating your time. Saltanat is working in FAO Kazakhstan office, I guess in Astana. And Saltanat, there's 100+ people here, participants, who would like to hear a quick overview in 5 minutes, the extent whether pollution by pesticides is an issue in your country, and what still needs to be done to address this issue. Do you think that those tools that we presented will be valuable or already in use in the country? If not, do you think they can be used in the future? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sergius. Hello, colleagues. Here in where I am now, already evening, so a little bit dark, sorry for that. Yes, we conducted in Kazakhstan national inventory of obsolete pesticides and rapid environmental assessment of contaminated sites. And we revealed, actually, we visited more than 900 sites and identified 165 sites where obsolete pesticides were revealed and contaminated sites also were detected. And unfortunately, most of the sites are very heavily contaminated, where contamination exceeds more than even 50,000 to 100,000 MPC times of MPC. And to tackle this issue, we conducted the trials on bio and phytoremediation at one of the identified sites. It is a site located next to former pesticide warehouse. And we received pretty impressive results, where we selected the appropriate phytoremediants and biomaterial, which were able to degrade POPs and up to 95%. Now our plan is to submit this methodology to our Ministry of Ecology, because especially this list of phytoremediants and biomaterial microbes are appropriate to our climate zone and could be replicated to other contaminated sites, which are more than 165. We understood that this is at least this figure, because we understood that it was not able to identify 100% of contaminated sites in our huge country. And this method would be very valuable, I think, for further methods, because as one of the most environmental friendly and not so cost efficient cost efficient for Kazakhstan. Regarding the tools which were represented, actually we already used rapid environmental assessment, for example, and EMTK tools were used during the national inventory for identification of those sites. So, and other sites that were produced, I think we will explore and try to disseminate around stakeholders and try to use them. So thank you very much for this event. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Saltanat. Indeed, it's very good to see that some of those tools are already used in practice in your country. And one more question, a short one. How about farmers? Do we have this in the pipeline to train farmers about the pesticide pollution through Farmer Field School or the Global Soil Doctors Program? That's been already done, or it's still in the pipeline to do?
Yes, it is still in pipeline, because it is very urgent and very crucial issue for Kazakhstan, because farmers are not aware, not only farmers, but even populations are not aware about that their residential sites are next to contaminated sites. And even when we were trying to find those pilot sites, the local people told us that, why do you concern about this? It is not a problem at all. We have other very serious issues, and we have to really raise awareness about this issue among not only farmers, but with only people who live next to these contaminated sites.
Great. And that's something also that INSOP can support you, because over the last year, and we already conducted some trainings on farmers in the Caribbean about trace elements, cadmium, but also we can do that for pesticide pollution in Kazakhstan, because materials are already publicly available on our website in the Global Soil Doctors Program. Thank you very much, Saltanat. Now you have a lot of connections here, and the colleagues, if you want to raise some questions to Saltanat and privately, please feel free. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for questions, but now I would like to move on to Lebanon and hear from our representative from Lebanon, Rafi Favre, who can give us a quick overview of what is the current situation in the country, in Lebanon, in terms of the pesticide pollution. Is it an issue? And if so, what can be done? Do you feel that those tools that we presented today, if they're not in use yet, can we use them and implement in the country to build the capacity and strengthen the country's capacity for tackling pesticide pollution?
Hello, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Sergius. Thank you very much for inviting Lebanon to this important webinar. My name is Rafi Favre. I'm based in Switzerland, actually, and providing distance support and in-country support for the country office operation. The issue on pesticide came very much on the high in the agenda of the office last year. Actually, in 2024, I led what we call a crop and food security assessment mission, CFSAM, upon request of the government, where we evaluated the impact of the multiple crises in Lebanon on the agriculture sector. And during that mission, we collected empirical evidence of massive overuse of pesticides and fertilizers, but particularly pesticides in the agriculture sector, particularly on potatoes and vegetables and with some fruits as well. We investigated the situation a little bit deeper, and actually we did not find a lot of data and studies on soil pollution, in particular pesticide soil pollution. We found some studies on water pollution. It seems all the water sources, 100% of the water sources tested in Lebanon were contaminated with pesticides, and more than 3/4 of the 3/4 of the samples were contaminated with heavy metals, because of the sources of the water that was used in agriculture. But pesticide pollution was recorded in all the water samples. Our empirical evidence last year, mostly interacting with farmers and observing practices farmers, and also this year's as managing an operation, indicated an extremely low awareness from farmers about the danger, the health hazards on humans, but also environmental hazards on pesticide. I can give various examples. One of them that struck me is actually 2 weeks ago, when we visited, just to illustrate a little bit the context, 2 weeks ago we visited some greenhouse farmers, and it happened that they were spraying in the greenhouse. I never seen anyone in Lebanon using PPE, protective equipment, on spraying pesticides. And after 5 minutes of talking with the farmers who came out from the greenhouse and as he was spraying and to talk to us, after 5 minutes, he walked back to the greenhouse in his cucumber field, picked a few cucumbers that were still covered with the spray, and offered us for eating. I mean, that just illustrates the level of the lack of awareness we have. And this goes through the value chain. The lack of awareness up to the consumers is also extremely low. And from the government side as well. There is no control whatsoever on pesticide residues in the food chain, any value chain in the local markets. There are some control of imported food and exported food, because particularly exported, you need certificate for export for what is being exported. But on a local value chain, there is no mechanism in place for control, and that leads to all sort of abuses. Based on this observation and many more observation we have done in the field, empirical evidence we collected in the field, suggests that we really probably Lebanon being a hotspot in pesticide pollution. Within the framework of a Canadian project that works on two value chains, apple, fruit trees in general, and vegetable, we are undertaking efforts to document the level of pesticide pollution on the food chain, but as well as on soil. We have provisions for up to 2,000 soil tests for the regular physical-chemical parameters, but we also have provision to do probably 500-600 pesticide tests on a subset of the samples. So that will give us the opportunity of having a very significant coverage in analyzing pesticide residues in soil in Lebanon. And that will be implemented between realistically end of this year until end of 2027. So we have 2 years ahead of us for implementing this. So in that respect, yes, of course, the instruments, the tools that are being developed by FAO are very important to train, to raise awareness, but particularly to train the laboratories that will be undertaking those tests. I think we're going we have already working very closely with your team, Sergius, and we have an international laboratory expert that will be visiting the country in July, and will be assessing the capacity of national laboratories to undertake this test, and therefore then building up on a capacity development plan. So your support with training and the online tools and the SOP will be extremely valuable for this work we'll be conducting. We are also working within the framework of the same project, but there are also other projects that do the same. We are working with farmers and providing training, farmer field schools on integrated pest management. We are reinforcing, of course, on the focus on worker safety and the impact this pesticide have on the value chain. But we do believe that a real change at farmer level will come if there is a change from the demand side, so that is more awareness from the consumers and a change from the government in terms of the actual control and monitoring of the pest residues across the value chain. If there is no incentive from the market side, there will be very little incentive for farmers to change their practices. That's from the surveys and the discussion we have with farmers and actors along the value chain. This is what we have learned actually. So it's being able to address the issue requires intervention at multiple levels, but certainly working with the government on documenting first the situation and working with the government on improving the legal framework and the control and the monitoring of pesticide residues is an important part of this effort. So thank you again, and we very much look forward to be working with the NSL team, and I'm very much also keen to share whatever we learn from Lebanon with other countries.
Great. Thank you very much, Rafi, for joining us and giving this overview of the situation in Lebanon, and shocking example of spreading pesticides without PPE equipment and then putting this directly into your stomach with still chemicals in there. It's quite worrying, and that's why we need to put our hands together and to continue raising this awareness and start working in the field, in the ground as soon as possible, because it's quite...
There are many other examples. I mean, this lack of awareness, leads to the way the pesticides are being stored next to food. You see that very often. It leads to how the pesticide containers are not disposed properly. Leads to the concentration of pesticide that are being used, several times the recommended doses. Leads to farmers mixing and applying cocktails of pesticide because they think it's more effective. And also in a situation where we are in Lebanon with 70% of the pesticide used are actually from smuggling. Across the border, we came to learn that over in Syria, there are laboratories that are actually producing not only pesticides that are banned, but pesticide that not yet registered, produced in Lebanon and smuggled across, produced in Syria and smuggled across the region. So, to reflect on what has been said before, I think we are in a world where some companies are exploiting some gray zone in this planet to take advantage and make profit out of product that should not be there, actually.
Yeah, indeed. Well, shocking reality, but it is a reality that we have to deal with and change as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Sultanat, Rafi. I want to continue the stakeholder dialogue. Again, we were planning to have Cabo Verde here, but unfortunately we cannot. But nevertheless, I'd love to continue this, but time plays against us. And I would like to wrap up everything what was said by giving the closing remarks to our INSUP chair, Ravi Naidu, who is still awake from Australia, to close the meeting. Before giving the floor to Ravi for quick closing remarks, once again, Thank you very much to today's speakers, to Violet Vera from Wageningen University, giving us examples of SPRINT projects, sharing results from Soils for Africa project. Thank you to my colleagues from Plant Production Protection Division who support me in the presentation, and I hope you are aware of those tools that we have. And once again, a big applause to colleagues and INSAB members, both lead authors and contributing authors who were working hard to pull this document together on the SOP, which will be published within upcoming weeks officially. I will share all the links with you, and then we will start working and building capacity of laboratories in the analysis of the SOP. Thank you again, Ravi. I would like to hear your opinion and closing remarks. Thank you. And thanks to
Thank you very much, sir.
Moderators, to Natalia and Maria, who supported us today. You were wonderful. Actually, it's not gender balanced today, but I'm very pleased to see a women team, majority of them. So fingers crossed we'll continue like this in the future. Thank you.
It was a great pleasure and very interesting. Thank you too for inviting.
Thank you very much, sir. Just at the outset, I would like to acknowledge your outstanding contributions, because as the coordinator of INSOP, you brought this together, and I know the hours that you have spent getting together this absolutely outstanding workshop. The workshop was initiated, and the welcome address was by Natalia Rodriguez, who is part of the GSP Secretariat. And then we had a presentation and indeed welcome from Thurum, who is the Secretary of Global Soil Partnership. And those of you who are present, indeed at one stage we had 108 delegates. Thurum recognized the extensive use of pesticides, not just what we're using today, and also pesticides that have been banned. We continue to use these in some countries in the presence of residues. The risks that it poses, these pesticides pose to the environmental health, human health, and indeed from One Health perspective as well. So that I thought was a really great welcome address, opening address by Thurum. That led to us to the first presentation, which was by Violeta, SPRINT project on pesticide pollution and the implications on One Health. The objective of this particular project, which I believe was funded by European Union, is to develop, test, and validate, and deliver a global health risk assessment toolbox. The toolbox is one which will have a number of tools that identifies the exposure pathways, the tools that you could use then to assess the risk that pesticide poses to different ecosystems. It could be environment from that perspective, human health, for instance, and something which is needed not just in Europe, but also in other countries as well. The presentation then focused on pesticide residues that they found in soils, the mixtures, and the potential risk that these mixtures pose, both to environment and human health. Some of the work that a team did, where they looked at a number of soils in which they found 100 different pesticide residues, varying in low to very high concentrations as well. And it was what was quite intriguing was that they have the SPRINT stakeholder network, which actually includes the governance, the input supply, production, for example, processing, and consumers, how these the stakeholder networks could be utilized to monitor the release of pesticides, presence in the environment, and the risk that it poses as well. This presentation then led to the one which Vera Silva from Wageningen University presented. Here, the project focused on pesticide residues in African soils. And I think the title was something like New Data from the Soils for Africa project. This project particularly focused on pesticide residues in 5 different countries. And the project, in a sense, looked at pesticides in soil to the depth of 0 to 5 centimeters. And incredibly here again, They found many different pesticides. Some soils where single pesticides were found. There's some soils in which they didn't find any pesticides, but mixtures as well. What was interesting is that the concentrations or levels of pesticides in these soils were somewhat lower than what you find in European soils. Yet the issue is that pesticides are being used, were used, and residues are still present. And clearly, when you look at banned pesticides, many of these banned pesticides are not that will naturally degrade in soils. Incredibly, many are present, and indeed the breakdown products as well. The question that I asked with this presentation as well was, the focus was 0 to 5 centimeter soils. What about subsurface soils? What does it mean from the perspective of pesticide leaching and presence in groundwater? And I recall reading a paper from UK where the British Geological Survey sampled groundwater from different wells across the country, and they found pesticides in many of these borewell waters. Equally, some of the work that my team, when I used to work for Australia's premier research institute, CSIRO, we also found a number of pesticides in groundwater. So clearly shows that pesticides are not just bound to surface soils. Some of these pesticides can also leach and contaminate groundwater. So the implications of groundwater quality, surface soils, and indeed, from One Health perspective, pasture, crop quality, and also human health. Some of the data that Vera presented, it would be really great once she's able to publish these papers as well. The key question again is developing countries. You can provide as many tools as you want to assess the potential risk. What do you do then? Do these countries have enough resources to implement strategies that could lead to degradation or cleanup of soils that have been impacted by these banned pesticides? Something that is worth thinking as well. The presentation that we had from Oksana and Sargis on principles of the pesticide registration toolkit, it clearly shows that FAO is quite driven. FAO has been working and has come up with 6 different toolkits, and these toolkits are available online, and FAO e-learning academy, for example, could also be accessed, and we should be able to download the kits from that as well. So all in all, FAO will providing a lot of support, not just for developing countries, but also for developed countries, for us to be able to access and download the toolkits and be able to connect with FAO representatives and see how we can utilize those. The presentation by Delia, Varela, and the team that helped pull together the standard operating procedure for pesticide residues in soil. This is not something that INSOP just came up and we said we should do this, but members of INSOP see this as something crucial and with something that they need. It's not about extraction of pesticides from soils, but analytical procedures as well. Lastly, because some soils have pretty low levels of pesticides, some still have higher levels of pesticides, an analytical method should be one which are good enough and with for ultra trace levels and also higher levels as well. Contributions from the 3 key scientists in Nipuni, Ellen is recognized, and indeed, Sargis, you worked very hard to pull this together as well. The final 2 presentations were country presentations. One was from Kazakhstan, and the 5-minute presentation. I thought this was really great, the 5-minute presentation, because this country seems to have banned pesticides. The residues in soils are 50 to 100 times higher than threshold values. What does that tell us about pesticides that have been used banned pesticides, they do not naturally degrade. They're present. What does it mean from risk perspective, not just for the environment, but also from food quality perspective, trade perspective, and human health, and hence One Health as well. The presentation by Rafiq from Lebanon, for example, is quite concerning. Not only to find pesticides in banned pesticides in soils, talk about crop quality. Indeed, farmers applying pesticides without recognizing risk from exposure and not using appropriate dress, for example, and then when they mix it as well. And indeed, this is something that I've also recognized in other countries where banned pesticides are still manufactured in developing countries and supplied from there. And who do you blame for that? Of course, people who make money. I also appreciate what Rafiq mentioned about farmers. At the end of the day, farmers do run and come up with accept management strategies, provided they recognize that at the end of the day, the bottom line is positive. They're not losing. And therefore, from strategy perspective, this is something which we need to take into consideration as well. So all in all, excellent workshop, excellent presentations, the content were quality, and I'm looking forward to greater interactions amongst our team, Sargis, and looking forward to standard operating procedure for it to be ready, and that will be another product that FAO will have in addition to the 6 toolkits that we have. So to all the delegates, I'm delighted to have you today, and I'm looking forward to us working together where possible. And with this, I would like to close the workshop.
Thank you, Ravi, for this summary. Once again, thanks a lot, colleagues, for staying beyond the time allocated. Appreciate it, and we will continue collaboration and organization of further workshops, webinars, and trainings when it's possible. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day and continuation. And to everyone, have a good evening, good afternoon, or good morning to everyone who is just waking up. Have a good day and goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you in the next meeting.
Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.